This is a joke.
Okay. Parshas Toldot. We're going to do Shlishi and Revi, the story of the wells. Okay, page 130. Everybody has it? Okay. So Yitzchak is in Gerar. And this is what happens now. Yitzchak becomes wealthier and wealthier. He owns an enormous amount of flock, and he's very wealthy. With his wealth comes what? The Plishtim become very jealous. Asher chapru abdei aviv b'mei Abraham aviv stimum plishtim ve'imalum afor. What happened? All of the wells that his father Abraham had dug when he was alive. Now, what did the plishtim? Page 130. Now, what did the plishtim do? They stuffed them. They stopped them. They closed them. Vayomer Avimelech Yitzchak lech mi'imanu ki atzamto mimenu me'od. Pasuk Tezayin. And Avimelech said to Yitzchak, go away, get out of here, for you have become much mightier than we. There's a sense here of jealousy, an enormous sense of jealousy. And the Torah tells us, right? The Torah doesn't mince words. They become very jealous because he's become so wealthy. And with the wealth, they think that there's power. So Yitzchak leaves. So he settles in Nachal Gror, and that's where he settles. That's where he makes his new home. Vayoshav Yitzchak vayachor beirot hamayim asher chapru b'mei Avraham aviv veistamum plishtim achrei mos Avraham vayikra lahen shemos kashemos asher kara lahen aviv. Pasuk Yud Ches. And Yitzchak dug anew the wells of the water dug anew those that were dug in the days of Avraham his father, and the Plishtim had stopped up after Abraham's death. So he's now doing. What did Avraham dug them? What did the Plishtim do in response? They had filled them. Now what is Yitzchak doing? He's undigging them, right? And he's giving them the same names that his father called them in his life. And Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of fresh water. In other words, they're redigging it. The wells are a source of life, correct? They're the main life stream for the people, in particular in the Middle East. Out comes a major fight. The shepherds of Yitzchak and the shepherds of Gerar are fighting. And they're arguing over whose water is. So they called this be'er, what did they call it? Eshek. Eshek means what? Conflict. So they called him a conflict because that's exactly what was happening. Right. Yes. Asek, right. Asek with a samach means business. Okay. And they dug another and they argued over that. This one was called hatred, right? Now they finally dug 3 times, right? So they dug the third, and there was no longer a argument. And that one is called Rechovot. It's called Rechovot, where he said, for now Hashem has granted us ample space and we can be fruitful in the land. And now what does Yitzchak finally do? Yitzchak returns to Be'er Sheva. After this whole story of this interlude with the digging, filling, he now goes and moves back after the wells story. So now God appears to him in a nevuah. I am the God of your father Abraham. Al tira, don't worry. Abraham Abdi. You have nothing to worry, for I will bless you and increase your offspring because of Abraham, my servant. So what does Yitzchak do? He built a mizbeach. They call the Shem Hashem. He calls it Shem Hashem, Vayet Sham Alo, and he pitches his tent there as well. Vayechu Sham Avdei Yitzchak Be'er. And Yitzchak's servants once again dig a well. You have to dig a well, in particular in Beersheba and that whole area, if you want water, right? And Avimelech from Gerar goes and with Pichol, his major general, and they go to see Yitzchak. Yitzchak wants to know, listen, I left. You kicked me out. I left. What are you running after me now? I'm back in Beersheba. What are you bothering me now? You hated me. You threw me out of there. No, so they said, no. We realize that you're a man of God. Let's make a covenant between us, between your children, our children. So they say, listen, if everything is fine, it'll be great. And if trouble, we'll have a fight. That's basically what they're saying. So, okay, they all agreed and they created a bris, a covenant, and they sat down and they had a party, right? They had a meal. And they got up in the morning, and each one went his way. Everybody left with shalom. In other words, they made a covenant. They came and they realized it wasn't so. What did Avimelech realize? He kicked out Yitzchak. Maybe it wasn't so smart to kick out Yitzchak. Yitzchak had brought with him a lot of good, right? So that now Avimelech is waking up. Let's have this bris. It shouldn't be a bad idea. So now they had the bris, and each one went on his own way. And so now it was on that very day that Yitzchak's servants came and told him that the well they had dug, guess what? They said, we found water, which is gold. And so, they named it Shiva. Be'er Sheva ad hayom hazeh. That's how the name Be'er Sheva came. Now there's complications. Didn't we weren't we told already that he went to Be'er Sheva? Yeah. Now you're telling me Be'er Sheva? Okay. Take a look at the Mefarshim, Rashi, other Mefarshim on that. That's not really our interest today. But what our interest today is that you have this whole story of Yitzchak digging and redigging. Why the well story? And that's really the question that we're going to deal with, because that's the Shlishi and Revi. Okay, so the first thing that the Rav does in trying to understand this whole story is he asks a basic question. How many parshiot are devoted to Yitzchak? Well, let's go back. How many parshiot are devoted to Abraham's life? 3. Name them. Lech Lecha, Vayera, Chayesar. Right? How many are to Yaakov? Oh, now you're going to have a problem. A lot. A lot. Most of the rest of Chumash Bereshis. I mean, you can even argue Toldos already, because Toldos is now going to be the story of the bracha. Toldos. And just go on. Toldos. Vayishlach, Vayetze, Vayishlach. It continues on. Even the story of Yosef is partially the story of Yaakov. But okay, we want many, many parshiot devoted to Yaakov. 3 to Avram, many to Yaakov. How many to Yitzchak? 1. Parshas Toldos. And how many stories in Parshas Toldos are dedicated to Yitzchak? Now think about it. Well, outside of his birth, right? And outside of the Akedah, which was last week's Parsha, right? Those really are, you could say, stories that more dealt with Abraham than Yitzchak. There's only one Parsha devoted to him. And how many stories? 2 stories. What are the 2 stories? The story that we just read, the wells, and what else? And what else? One more story. And the blessing, brachos, the argument between Esav and Yaakov over the brachos, and we still have it reverberating to this day, if you will. So 2 stories, wells and brachos. That's it that the Torah devotes to Yitzchak. In other words, Yitzchak becomes the person of mystery. He's cloaked in mystery. We know he's the cryptic figure of the Avos, as the Rav calls it. He's the cryptic figure. He has the aura of mystery. Avraham is an open book. Yaakov is an open book. Complicated, but an open book. Yitzchak, we almost know nothing about him. Who is he? How would you paint a picture of this Yitzchak? So that's what the Rav wants to know. Why is this so? That Abraham is really an open book. Yaakov, complicated, but an open book. Yitzchak, aura of mystery, cryptic figure. Why? So the Rav turns to Kabbalah to get us the answer. Kabbalah identifies Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov based on the characteristics that the Kabbalah says HaKadosh Baruch Hu has. And it then says Avraham is the midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's chesed. He clearly personifies chesed. Yaakov is the midah of emes, titein emes liYaakov. Yaakov is truth. We're going to talk about that in 2 seconds. What's Yitzchak? What's Yitzchak's gvura? What's gvura? What's gvura? Strength, power, might. Okay, so now this is what the Rav explains. Avram personifies chesed. If you had to paint a portrait of Avram, what kind of a portrait would you paint? I would like to suggest, I would call him the social man. He's the social man. Everybody loves Avram. Everybody is talking to Avram. Avram's walking down the street. He's smiling. He's greeting everybody. He goes to the marketplace. Everybody says, "Hi, Avram," and gives him a patch on a slap on the back. "Hi, how are you doing?" And Avram is schmoozing with everybody. Correct? That's how you would depict Avram. Avram is Mr. Social. Of course he is. Chesed, by definition, means what? You share yourself with others. You open yourself to others. You become part of others. That's Avram. Avram is the midah of chesed, openness. What about Yaakov? Yaakov's emes. Emes is a complicated personality. It changes by the situation. And doesn't it for Yaakov? Yaakov is the most complicated of the Avos. Stories, is he taking the bracha correctly in this parsha from Esav? Isn't he? Is he right? He's running away. Then his conflict with his father-in-law, Lavan, for his wives. His whole relationship is a pursuit of emes is not a straight line. It never is. Emes is dependent upon a lot of different particulars, correct? Different elements that decide what is the truth when truth is being pursued. So Yaakov is this complicated individual. What about Yitzchak? Yitzchak, what does Gvura mean? So Rav Soloveitchik says, Gvura, and I quote him, connotes retreat and withdrawal into one's private world. Gvura, what do you mean by Gvura? The Gvura of not being the social, being insulated. That's why Yitzchak is wrapped in a mantle of mystery. Yitzchak's nature is hidden, separated from society. He has that strength to be himself and by himself, with himself. This explains why we hear so little about Yitzchak. He is the opposite of his father Avram. Avram is that great social being, right? Out in the public. Yitzchak is what? Insulated and isolated from society. He represents that opposite of his father. Avram is out there. Yitzchak is inward. Yitzchak is insulated and isolated. One further note that the Rav makes about Yitzchak. Gvura is synonymous with din, with judgment. The Akedah is a manifestation of Gvura, is a manifestation of strict judgment. When do we read about the Akedah? Which Yom Tov?
Rosh Hashanah.
That's correct. What is the Kriyas HaTorah on Rosh Hashanah? All about whom? Yitzchak is the Ish Rosh Hashanah. Every Yontif has a different personality, but the Yontif of Rosh Hashanah is Yitzchak's Yontif. Rosh Hashanah is Yom Hadin. Rosh Hashanah, that's why we read Hashem Pakad Sarah. Whose birth?
Come here.
Yitzchak's
I don't
birth.
have. You can
And
put
that's day one. And
stuff.
then what's day two? What's day two? The Akedah. What about Yom Kippur? Is it still din? Not at all. Yom Kippur
So
is
this is the best parsha of this
Yom
whole
Harachamim.
Toldot, telling all about everything.
Please
You want to move it?
Please silence your phone. Please, okay? Thank you. Yom Kippur is Yom Shel Rachamim. It's the opposite. So the Rav points out, Rosh Hashanah is Yom Hadin. Rosh Hashanah is Yitzchak. Yitzchak is Gvura. Yitzchak represents the judgment, and Yitzchak represents insulated and isolated from society, and he therefore is the mystery. That is now our total introduction to this story in Toldot, because now we have to really ask, what's the next question we have to ask? If that is so, what in the world is this story? If you're going to choose two stories to share about Yitzchak, what is this story of digging or undigging the wells and redigging the wells? Why is that the story that the Torah is going to share with us about this individual who is Gvura, who is insulated, who is cloaked in an aura of mystery? What is that going to share with them? What insights are we going to have to understand a little about Yitzchak? Would this be the story that you would have chosen? That's the Rav's question. Knowing this about Yitzchak, that Yitzchak is Gvura, if you were writing the text and you were saying, okay, I'm going to give you two stories and that's it, but you got to get some insight into this man, you're going to give me, I get the second story, by the way. Second story is totally understandable, because the second story is Yitzchak, the blind man. He's not his father. His father reads the tea leaves very well. His father understands people. His father gets it. His father is not happy when Yishmael is being kicked out of the house. He's not, because he doesn't think that that's the approach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "You Shema B'Kolah, listen to her." In this case, your sociability is not going to be good for whom? Yitzchak. You understand? It's Yitzchak. Sarah saw that. Sarah appreciated that. Avraham understands people, because at the end, what does Yishmael do? According to tradition, according to last week we saw, what does Yishmael do at the very end of Parashas Chayesera? Rabbi Zev Wiener wrote about this. He does tshuva, right? He buries his father with Yitzchak. They both go to the Levaya for Avram. They're both involved in it. So he gets people. Yitzchak, if you're Gvura and you're Din, what happened? And you're in the aura of mystery, you're not connected with people. You don't understand people like your father does. So why would you give this story of redigging the wells? And that's what the Rav is going to deal with this morning. Yes.
I have an idea. I haven't fleshed it out, but just some insight. In Pirkei Avot, it says Ezehu Gibor HaKovesh et Yitzchak.
Right.
And he doesn't, there is this argument and he doesn't confront them.
Well, let's see what Rabbi Soloveitchik has to say. Okay, but that's the question. That's why I gave you this whole introduction. That's the question that hovers over this story when you really are studying this story of Shlishi and Revi, is why is this the story and how are we going to understand who Yitzchak is? So let's take a look.
To add one more thing.
Yeah.
One of the places, one of the Be'erot, the Siddharth, only one place it says Chaim. So he was about to be Akedah, to be slaughtered.
No, he was the Akedah before.
Yes. Oh, okay, the Akedah was before, but he saw the light. So in the Be'er, Chaim, and this is the only one.
Okay, but how does that give us an insight into who Yitzchak is? Okay, let's take a look. Okay. I hear. Okay, take a look. So now let's start seeing what Rav Soloveitchik has to say about about this question that hovers over these two aliyot, Shlishi and Revi. Take a look at Pasuk Yud Ches, and on page 130. Vayelech misham Yitzchak vayichan benachal Geror vayeshev sham. Right. So now he goes and he lives in Geror. Vayoshav Yitzchak vayachbor et beirot hamayim asher chafru b'mei Abraham aviv. What is he doing? He's redigging wells from his father's time. That were filled by the Plishtim. The Plishtim had filled them when? So what happens? Just tell me facts here. Tell me exactly what's happening here.
Avram digs him, the Plishtim fill him, and he's reclaiming his father's wealth.
You left out one piece, Elizabeth. Avram dies.
Avram dies.
During Abraham's life, what happened? They did not, they left him alone. Remember, what is a well? A well is the source of life. A well is like gold because you're living in the Middle East. If you don't have water, you don't have plants, you don't have produce, you don't have life. It's as simple as that. That's how you have to, that's how you're going to create vegetation in the Middle East in particular. Where? In Beersheba, in this area, 100%. You need the wells. So Avram dug the wells. Avram dies. They respond by filling them up. And now he goes and redigs them, right? Go back to Perek Chof Aleph, Pasuk Vav. Let's see something. Perek Chof Aleph, Pasuk Vav. Perek Chof Aleph, Pasuk Vav is the birth of Yitzchak.
Everyone's gonna laugh.
That's correct. Perek Chof Aleph, page 94. Vatomer Sarah Sechok Asa Li Elokim Ko Hashamea Yitzchak Li. She, and we now understand, Sarah is giving the name, right? So Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Whoever hears will laugh, right? Laugh for me or at me. What does that mean? So he translated, Ko Hashamea Yitzchak Li. They will laugh for me. What is laughter? What does laughter mean here? What was she saying? Now, it is true. Rashi and Onkelos say laughter in this pasuk means joy. They will celebrate with me, right? Wow, such an old lady and such an old couple. Wow, the miracle of miracles. They had a child. Everybody will join with me. They will celebrate with me. They'll come to the Kiddush, right? And they'll wish Mazel Tov. All wonderful. But yet, Yonasan ben Uziel disagrees. Yonasan ben Uziel translates the word laughter as mockery, derision. They're making fun of Sarah. People literally laugh. What are you talking about? An old couple, one is 100, one is 90. What, they're having a child? They laugh at Avram and Sarah because they argued, the people of the world, the people of Plishtim in particular, they argued that there was no way that this young child is going to carry on the philosophy of the old parents. There's going to be a generation gap, an enormous generation gap, and the son will not continue the lineage, the philosophy, the way of life of the father. The young child, they said, represents the new generation. The new generation has its own agenda. Sounds familiar, right? New generation has its own agenda. They predicted that when Avram and Sarah would die, so would the philosophy of that couple die with them. Avram and Sarah, wow, there was a revolution. Remember, Avram and Sarah is a revolution occurring. And they're having a child, and such an age gap between the child and the parents, and you want to create a whole new nation from this? It ain't gonna happen. Because the young generation, he represents the young generation, he's not gonna buy into this. That was the tzchok, according to Yonasan ben Uziel, and many of them have portion. And Yitzchak and Sarah already predicted it, if you will. Not that they're celebrating with me, they're making fun of me, right? With their death, their altars, their mizbeach would be dismantled for once and for all.
So that would imply also that Sarah had a concern that her child would not carry on the legacy.
Sarah was concerned that, no, Sarah understood that that's what they were laughing. No, Sarah is saying, you know what the world is saying about me? I and my husband, Avram, are not going to be able to impart it to we're going to show them they're wrong, right? She's just quoting, Linda, she's quoting what they're thinking. She's articulating what they're thinking. So that's what Tzchok Li means, according to Yonasan ben Oziel. Yitzchak was a laughter of derision, a source of derision. He's not going to carry on with his father. Okay? But now something shocking happened. Years passed. And now those who predicted an end of Avram and Sarah's mission saw something they couldn't believe. It was shocking to them. They saw Yitzchak committed to doing what? To resuscitating Avram and Sarah's work. Avram is gone. Sarah is gone. Yitzchak's alone with Rivka, of course, at his side. And he was doing what, ladies? He was redigging that which his father had dug years ago. In other words, he was devoted to the same philosophy. He was living the same lifestyle as his parents. He was redigging what? The wells of his father, right? With this realization, suddenly the laughter ceased, Rav Soloveitchik notes. The world stopped laughing. They stopped making jokes. What did they do? They went from making jokes, derision, to jealousy. Jealousy. They couldn't believe it. They went from derision to jealousy. And they began doing what? Fighting with Yitzchak. They literally fought with Yitzchak. They're going to stop him. They thought they didn't have to do anything. This young guy, he's not going to carry on the father and mother's revolution. They didn't like the revolution. Nobody likes a revolution, right? Except the people that are involved in the revolution. Nobody likes the revolution. In place of derision, jealousy, and hatred were replaced. They were driven to crush Yitzchak once and for all. And if you crush Yitzchak, you end Avram and Sarah's revolution. They went from derision, right? Derision to hatred and all that it entailed. That is exactly what this story is telling us. This, however, led to a good outcome as well. Everything negative has a positive too. The Rav noted that it is true that jealousy leads to oppression and to persecution, but it also leads to respect. They went from derision to respect. They were jealous, but jealousy comes out of a respect. I'm jealous because I want what they have, and I don't have it. With this evolution, we are witnessing the first victory of Avram and Sarah's house. In the words of the Rav, I quote the Rav, it is better to be an object of jealousy and hatred, which leads to respect, than an object of pity, which is always accompanied by derision and contempt. It's better to be an object of jealousy and hatred, which leads to respect, than to be an object of pity, which is always accompanied by derision and contempt. The story of the wells is a story, if you will, of the victory of Avram and Sarah with Yitzchak against the world. You have Avram and Sarah on this side of the river, right? Avram Ivri, and you have the rest of the world here. And the rest of the world initially was doing what? Mocking them. You think you're going to be able to pass on your philosophy to the next generation? And Avram and Sarah demonstrate, yes, we can. You watch. Yitzchak represents that link, right? And Yitzchak, how do we know that Yitzchak does it? Because he comes along and he does what? He redigs the wells his father dug. He is committed to his father's lineage. And what does he call them? The same names that his father gave him. He's devoted to his father's memory. And he's going to do everything in the world to make it demonstrate that it works. Now remember, the wells represent lifeline, right? He's going to demonstrate to the world by my commitment to my father and mother's philosophy, there's life. And sure is, Jews are still around. Last time I saw, the Plishtim are nowhere to be found, right? They were jealous and they respected. And that's what this story is all about. Continue on. Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Now we say, well, here, the first one, I'm sorry, do Pasuk Chaf. So now they're fighting over the two shepherds are fighting over whose water is. And so the first one they're called Asek was Asek, a debate, right? A conflict. He's asking because they conflicted over it. Now they dig another one. Vayarivu Gam Oleha, and they here fight again. Sitna. And this one is called Sitna. Now, if you take a look in Rashi, Soloveitchik notes, Rashi quotes the Medrash, and the Medrash says, Asek is an allusion to the first Beis Hamikdash. Sitna is an allusion to the second Beis Hamikdash. That's what Rashi says. In other words, one bear is an allusion to Bayis Rishon, second bear is an allusion to Bayis Sheni. The first one is Asek, which means conflict. The second one, which means hatred, that's the second Beis Hamikdash. Soloveitchik says, what does this Medrash mean? What is Rashi teaching us? And the Rav explains, well, you have to understand the history here. Then you'll understand what the Medrash is saying and why Rashi says it. The first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed by whom? Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Bavel. What was Nebuchadnezzar's goal? It was his objective. What was his objective when he destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash? His objective was a military victory. That's what Nebuchadnezzar wanted. This manifested itself by capturing land, not by killing Jews. Killing Jews was not Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel's goal. Proof is, most of the Jews were taken captive. He wanted live Jews. He didn't want dead Jews. He wanted land. Nebuchadnezzar wanted land. So his conquering and destroying the Beis Hamikdash was achieving his goal. He wanted land. He got the land. Many Jews were kept alive and taken as captives to Babel. Thus, the first wells allude to this because it's called Asek, conflict, not death. It's not at all death. It's a conflict. In contrast, what about the second Beis Hamikdash? Who destroys the second Beis Hamikdash? The Romans. What was their goal? Their goal was promoted out of an irrational hatred. The Romans were motivated by a desire and a goal to destroy, not and to conquer land, but to destroy the Jewish people. They didn't want the Jewish people. They were not interested in land. They were interested in wiping us out. The second wells, therefore, were called Sitna, hatred. There's also another point to this story that you can't forget. The wells, Rav Soloveitchik knows, is you have to know the timeline here, right? The Torah recounts that twice the Plishtim fought Yitzchak about the wells, right? What happens the third time? They didn't fight, no longer. And what's the last one's called? Rechovot, right? Rechovot. In other words, there's the first one and the second one, they're fighting over. The third one, by the third time, he succeeded in digging wells without any contention. This story depicts the cynicism the world had at the time towards Abraham and Sarah's whole philosophy of life. The filling of the wells by the Plishtim represented their mistake, that they thought Yitzchak would not carry on the approach of his parents. They thought Yitzchak would not pay any attention to the well dug by his father. They thought the wells were over. The source of life was over. The wells or the water represented Avram's spiritual approach to that he promoted. But Yitzchak caught on and he picked up where his father left. And they were caught off guard. the world was caught off guard. The Plishtim were caught off guard when he does what? He redigs the wells of his father. That's manifested his commitment to ensuring that his parents' legacy would survive and thrive. And that's exactly what happens in this story. Who's getting the last laugh? Yitzchak is getting the last laugh. Avram and Sarah are getting the last laugh. Correct? Yitzchak, therefore, means, oh, you don't think that we're going to do it? We're going to do it. And Yitzchak represents, now that explains the question that the Rav asked. Why is this story the story that's chosen out of two stories? That's all we have about Yitzchak to paint a picture of Yitzchak. Again, what was Yitzchak's midah? What was his characteristic that represented him? Gvura. And what is redigging the Be'erot all about? Gvura. A tremendous, I want to translate the word Gvura differently than strength and power and might. You know what Gvura means? Determination. He has the determination to carry on where everybody thought he wouldn't. I remember Reb Soloveitchik at one of my cousins' bar mitzvahs. I remember it vividly. It was my uncle and aunt, Zichronam Livracha, their youngest son, Danny's bar mitzvah. And the Rav talked about, it was Parshas Shoftim, so it's in August. And the Rav, no, sorry, it was not in Parshas Shoftim. It was in Parshas Yisro. No, this was not Danny's. I'm mistaken. It was his older brother at his bar mitzvah in Shoftim. And the Rav talked, my uncle was an engineer. And the Rav talked about the Medrash that says, what is the reward of mitzvos? So the Gemara, the Medrash says three things when you do mitzvos. First of all, the Medrash says, mitzvos ba'almahu. The reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. And then the Medrash goes on and says, no, there are rewards. And one of them is banim. Banim. Osher, banim, and kavod. Those are the three. Osher, banim, and kavod. And it was a brilliant, drasha as only the Rav could give. He explained what Osher meant. What does wealth mean? What does kavod mean? What does banim mean? What does having children mean? And he turned to my uncle Julie, who just unfortunately passed away. He was 95, but he just passed away in January. So my uncle Julie, an engineer, he turned to Julie. He was very close to Julie, was his gabbai in the shul, in Maimonides. So he turned to Julie and he said to Julie, Julie, you're an engineer. Engineers build bridges between generations. Right? What's banim? Banim is the ability to build bridges between generations. Who had this ability? Avram and Sarah. They built a bridge between generations. And there was an enormous gap. You needed this bridge because it went from Avram and Sarah to Yitzchak. But they built it, right? And Yitzchak had the midah of Gvura to continue and to cross that bridge, if you will. That's what the Gvura means. Gvura means he has the determination to redig that which his father dug many years ago. And the world didn't appreciate, because what did they do with it? They filled them up. They stopped them. What do you mean stopping them? You're destroying the source of life. Yitzchak is determined to come back and to redig them. And he's going to win, because first time, and they stop them up again. Second time, and they stop them up again. Third time, you win, Yitzchak, right? That's Jewish history, isn't it? The wells are a model of Jewish history. That's exactly what it is. It's our history being presented to us in this story. That's exactly why this is the story of all stories that the Torah wants to give us for Yitzchak. Let's finish off.
Is Rehovot supposed to be like the third temple?
Yes. Yeah, it would be. It would be. Rehovot means, what is Rehovot? Expansive. That's correct. Okay. What did the Nazis want? What did the Nazis want? Dead Jews. They didn't want to continue. They didn't want to benefit from the Jew. Anything that the Jew, it became sitna, right? Became hatred to a point where all of the good that the Jews did, they burnt it. They destroyed it. The books, everything about it was sitna, right? This is the Jewish history to this very day. They'll fill it up. They'll destroy it.
They took it to destroy it.
They didn't take it so that they benefited from it. Anything that had a shmeck of Judaism, anybody that has shmeck that was from Jews, they were thrown out of the universities. Yeah, it's the same thing. Right. Of course they could have. They didn't. It was sitna. It was sitna. It was promoted out of hatred. We don't want this philosophy to exist. There's nothing good about this philosophy for us. That's the thinking. It's irrational. And we saw it in the ultimate in our lifetime, right? We saw the manifestation. It wasn't our lifetime, but our parents' lifetime, the previous generation saw it in its iteration of total irrationality and the ugliness that it produced, right? The ultimate completion, if you will. That's why a number of people felt, hey, how much more can happen without our destiny finally unfolding, right? And what happens? Well, now you can understand, certainly you can understand historically why certain people think that the state of Israel has a messianic element to it, right? Because it happened right after that terror, the worst moment in Jewish history, the almost annihilation of our people, right? And then what happened from that? From that blood and ashes came a flourishing state of Israel. Okay, but I'm just pointing out that you can understand, you can appreciate this thinking. But anyhow, back to here. Let's continue on. Let's finish off. Now, what happens here? So, Pasuk Chofei. What does he do on page 132? Vayiven sham mizbeach, vayikra b'shem Hashem, vayet sham oalo, vayichu sham avdei Yitzchak be'er. He builds a mizbeach and he calls it by the name of Hashem. In the previous pasuk, let's take a look in the previous pasuk. Right, that's pasuk Chof Hey, Chof Dalet. Vayera elov Hashem, v'alayla ahu. Hashem appears to him in a nevuah. Right? This is a nevuah. Vayomer Anochi, and how does God represent himself to Yitzchak? Vayomer Anochi, I, Elokei Avraham Avicha. I am who? The God of your father Abraham. Al tira, don't worry, because I will be with you and I will bless you. Right? But how does he represent himself to him? He represents himself to him as the father, the God of his father. So in the previous pasuk, the aftermath of the story of the wells, we are told Yitzchak now returns to Beersheba, and on the night that he returns, he has this prophetic vision, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears to Yitzchak Elokei Avraham. The Rav notes that this is amazing because God does not mention his personal relationship with Yitzchak at this moment. Don't you think at this moment in this nevuah, in Pasuk Chof Dalet, Vayera elov Hashem v'alayla hu, Vayomer Anochi Elokei Avram Avicha, Elokei, I am your God. Where's I am your God? No, you're just Elokei Avram Avicha. He's only representing himself to, at this juncture, Yitzchak certainly, you would think, deserves Elokei, his personal relationship. So the Rav notes, this indicates that Yitzchak had yet to develop his own approach with Hashem. He's still in the shadow of his father. His whole relationship with Hashem up until this moment was dictated only by his father. Whatever Avram did, that's how this fact was underscored back in Pasuk Yud Ches. Go back to Pasuk Yud Ches. Vayoshav Yitzchak vayachpor es beirot hamayim asher chafru b'mei Avram Aviv. Right? Everything vayis shemum plishtim acharei mos Avram vayikru lahen shemos kashemos Asher kara lahen aviv. What is the overwhelming statement in this pasuk? Aviv, Aviv, Aviv. Aviv dug them. Aviv named them. He is following in his father's footsteps, right? Yitzchak again dug the wells of the water which had been dug by his father. And Avram and the Plishtim had stopped them, and he named them the names that his father gave them. The Rav argues, as we've noted, that the Torah is telling us much more than just a story about digging wells. That we've certainly pointed out. In the words of the Rav, and I quote, the Torah is teaching us that Yitzchak only drew water from the wells that his father had dug. He had not dug his own wells. He had not yet developed his own unique religious approach. At this juncture, not yet. At this point, therefore, Hashem promised to bless Yitzchak and multiply his seed, but only for the sake of Abraham. But now, in this pasuk that we are dealing with, in pasuk Chaf Hey, something changes. Take a look in pasuk Chaf Hey. Pasuk Chaf Hey, Vayiven Sham Mizbeach. Who's building the Mizbeach?
Yitzchak.
Vayikra b'shem Hashem. What does that mean? He's not invoking his father's name at all. Vayikra b'shem Hashem. Vayet sham ohalo. And what is he doing? He's now doing what?
He's
When you
established.
read this pasuk, definitely with new eyes, right? You read this pasuk, he's now going on his own. His father was very important to him. This whole story of the wells. But now, okay, I've established the wells. Now what do I have to do? I have to take it to the next step. You can't just be in the shadow of your father. Yitzchak realized that it was insufficient to reopen just his father's wells. He had to, if you will, dig his own wells, if he was going to have his own relationship with Hashem. At that moment, he builds his own Mizbeach, and he calls it Vayikra b'shem Hashem, which represents a new moment in Yitzchak's life, a new development, right? He's building his own edifice, his own approach to Hashem. And then and only Hashem responds to him accordingly. We know that he succeeded because we are going to see this in Perek Chaf Ches, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Take a look, please, in the opening of Vayetze, page 144. B'nei Hashem nitzav alav vayomar ani Hashem. Continue. Elokei Avraham avicha. What is suddenly added? Elokei Yitzchak. Suddenly here. Who's this? Right? Right? This is the story of Yaakov. Now Yaakov hears that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak. So did Yitzchak succeed in creating now his personal relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? He sure does. Yaakov, in his prophetic vision, Hashem identifies himself as the Hashem of Avram and Hashem of Yitzchak. Now we can appreciate something that you say 3 times a day, and on Yom Kippur 5 times, right? Oh, from Yom Kippur, from night to night. Oh, how does the Amidah go? How would you have written it?
Avram
Well,
Yitzchak.
read it very carefully. Elokei Avraham, ve'elokei Yitzchak, ve'elokei Yaakov. If I was writing it, I would say Elokei Avraham, Yitzchak, ve'Yaakov. What's Elokei, Elokei, Elokei? Now the Rav explains. Each one had his unique relationship with the Borei Olam. My relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not yours. Your relationship is not mine. Nobody can have the identical relationship. It's based on what our parents taught us. The first step is our relationship that our parents had. That's where we build the foundation. But then if you just leave it at the foundation level, you never build your own edifice. Right? The foundation has to be secure. That's Avram and Sarah for Yitzchak. And he does it. What does he do? He digs the wells and he names them what his father named them. But then he has to go off on his own. Okay, that's it. Now I have to do my own digging. Now I have to build my own edifice. Now I have to have my own relationship. And Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, the Elokei Yaakov in the Amidah reminds us you can't have the identical relationship that your parents had. You have to strike out on your own and create your own unique relationship with the Borei Olam. It has to be different. Everybody's has to be unique. And that's what this story is telling us, according to Rav Soloveitchik. So to recap and to end, why, again, for Avraham, we have 3 parshios. For Yaakov, we have many parshios. For Yitzchak, only 1 parsha. And the truth is, only 2 stories. How are we going to paint a picture of this person who's literally caught in an aura of mystery? But we can now, can't we? We can paint a picture of an individual who really represents Gevura. How do we interpret Gevura? Determination. Yitzchak is the most determined, even more than Avram and more than Yaakov. He's determination personified. So what does he represent? Number 1, he represents the change from derision to respect, right? Everybody laughed at him initially. Oh, he's not going to carry on his parents' traditions, but he does. He's devoted to them, but it doesn't stop there. He's determined to carry it on and to do what? To take it to the next step, because he's Vayiven Sham Mizbeach, Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. He's going to now build. He digs his father's wells, redigs his father's wells, but now he's going to do what? He's going to go out and dig his own and build his own relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Yitzchak, as we see, this story is brilliant in helping us paint the portrait of Yitzchak. Yitzchak is the one who really represents this Kvura. We don't need to know a lot about him because he is reserved. I think that's the right word to use. He's reserved, unlike his father, who's Mr. Social, unlike his son, Yaakov, who is willing to tackle every problem that comes his way, right? He's Titan Emes Yaakov. He's going to go and he's going to find Emes no matter where he goes, right? Toras Yaakov is going to go everywhere with him. Yitzchak, reserved, but Yitzchak's determined to continue his father's traditions and to build on them. Does he succeed? Yes, he does. Because we see when Yaakov has his nevuah, leaving his father's house, now HaKadosh Baruch Hu credits him being Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak. So that's why this story is so important. It's not about wells. It's about a commitment to seeing a lifeline continue.
Mhm. So the wells are basically a metaphor for
Yes,
the
100%.
values and legacy of Abraham.
100%. Very well said. The wells are the metaphor. That is correct. That 100%. And then now we can understand the wells as being also an allusion to the Batei Mikdash, right? It's all a metaphor. It's a metaphor of our relationship with the non-Jewish world, how they relate to us. And it's true. They either hate us or they respect us, or right? They either, well, this generation, it's post-Holocaust, they smothered us with love. We intermarried, right? We intermarried. We always, anybody who understands Jewish history says Hamas and Hezbollah, if they only would know that they could destroy us much faster with love than they can do with what they're trying to do, right? It's true. You destroy the Jew with love.
Right, that's true.
It's much faster than destroying the Jew with sitna. Sitna doesn't work. We're not gonna tolerate it, and we're going to rebuild ourselves every time, right? But unfortunately, we know way too well that the assimilation is the biggest problem. Okay, next week we'll continue on. Okay.
Rabbi Muskin?
Yes.
Hi, Rabbi, it's Shelley Rube.
Yes, Shelley.
Hi, I want to tell you, of course, once again, how every share that I